What if the most bizarre rituals of the ancient world were actually centuries ahead of their time? While medieval Europe wallowed in filth and disease, one civilization had already unlocked secrets of cleanliness that modern science would not understand for over 1,000 years. These practices seemed strange, even repulsive to outsiders, but they held wisdom that would save countless lives and reveal a profound understanding of health that the world had forgotten. In the courts of the Tang dynasty, nobles would begin each day with what seemed like an act of madness. They would collect their first morning urine in ornate ceramic vessels, not for disposal, but for a purpose that would horrify visiting diplomats. This golden liquid was carefully filtered through silk cloth and mixed with rare herbs before being applied to their teeth and gums. Foreign observers described this practice as barbaric, the height of Chinese eccentricity. Yet these same nobles possessed teeth that remained strong and white well into old age, while their European counterparts suffered from decay and loss by their 30s. Modern science would later discover that morning urine contains high concentrations of urea, a powerful antibacterial agent that prevents gum disease and tooth decay. What seemed like madness was actually pioneering oral hygiene. But this was only the beginning of their unconventional wisdom. Deep within the households of wealthy Song dynasty families, servants would perform a ritual that defied all logic. They would take human waste and bury it in carefully maintained pits, covering it with layers of ash, lime, and specific types of clay. For months, they would tend to these pits like gardens, monitoring temperature and moisture with scientific precision. The result was not disposal, but transformation into something the Chinese called night soil gold. This processed waste was then used to fertilize their crops and gardens, while other civilizations simply threw their refuse into rivers or streets, causing devastating plagues. The Chinese had discovered that controlled decomposition eliminated dangerous pathogens while creating the richest fertilizer known to man. Their cities remained remarkably disease-free, and their agricultural yields were legendary. Yet the true horror of their genius was still to come. In the imperial palaces of the Ming dynasty, physicians would perform a procedure so disturbing that many Western visitors could not watch without fainting. They would take thin metal wires, heated until they glowed red, and insert them into the flesh of patients at specific points across their bodies. The victims would lie still as smoke rose from their burning skin, their faces twisted in apparent agony. These metal worms would be left embedded for hours, sometimes days, creating patterns of wounds that seemed ritualistic, almost demonic. Foreign doctors declared it torture masquerading as medicine. But patients who endured this ordeal recovered from illnesses that killed others. Infections that ravaged entire European cities were stopped cold by these burning metal insertions. The Chinese had discovered that controlled cauterization could seal wounds, prevent infection, and stimulate the body's natural healing processes in ways that conventional medicine could not explain. What appeared to be sadistic torture was actually an advanced surgical technique. But their most disturbing practice was yet to be revealed. In remote monasteries of ancient China, monks would engage in a practice so revolting that even hardened warriors would flee in terror. They would allow their fingernails to grow until they became twisted, yellow claws, sometimes reaching lengths of over a foot. These grotesque appendages would be carefully maintained, cleaned with special oils, and used in ways that seemed to defy sanity. The monks would use these nail tools to clean their ears, remove parasites from their skin, and perform delicate medical procedures on fellow monks. Visitors described them as living corpses, their hands transformed into instruments of decay. Yet these same monasteries had the lowest rates of infection and disease in all of China. The extended nails, when properly maintained, became sterile tools that could perform precision cleaning and minor surgery without the risk of contamination that came from shared metal implements. What looked like grotesque neglect was actually sophisticated personal hygiene management. But nothing could prepare the world for what they did with their own saliva. In the bustling markets of ancient Beijing, Vendors would perform an act so disgusting that it would empty entire streets of foreign merchants. They would take mouthfuls of tea, swish it around their mouths for several minutes, then spit the liquid back into the same cup before drinking it again. This process would be repeated multiple times, creating a frothy, contaminated-looking mixture that they would finally swallow with apparent satisfaction. Traders from other lands watched in horror as these merchants seemed to poison themselves with their own saliva. But these same vendors remained remarkably healthy, rarely falling victim to the stomach ailments and digestive diseases that plagued travelers. The Chinese had discovered that saliva contains powerful enzymes and antibodies that, when concentrated through this process, could neutralize harmful bacteria and aid digestion. There, contaminated, tea was actually a form of internal medicine that protected them from the countless pathogens present in ancient marketplaces. Yet their most shocking practice would challenge everything the world thought it knew about cleanliness. In the deepest vaults of Chinese imperial medicine, practitioners would engage in a ritual so horrifying, so unthinkable, that its very existence was considered a state secret. They would deliberately expose themselves to the bodily fluids of plague victims, collecting the infected matter in sacred vessels. But rather than falling victim to these deadly diseases, they would perform an elaborate ceremony of controlled infection. They would take tiny amounts of this death itself, and through a process involving heat, time, and mysterious chemical reactions, transform it into something else entirely. They would then deliberately infect themselves with their transformed plague matter, inducing mild illness that somehow protected them from the very diseases that were killing millions across the known world. Foreign spies who witnessed these ceremonies reported that Chinese physicians were dancing with death itself, embracing the plague to defeat it. What they were witnessing was humanity's first primitive form of vaccination, developed over 1,000 years before Edward Jenner would be credited with the discovery. These medical shamans had learned to turn death into life, disease into immunity, using methods that seemed like dark magic but were actually profound scientific innovation. The ancient Chinese understood something that the rest of the world had forgotten, that health and cleanliness were not always what they appeared to be. Their willingness to embrace the disgusting, the uncomfortable, and even the dangerous in pursuit of wellness revealed a sophisticated understanding of the human body that would not be matched for centuries. While other civilizations fled from the unpleasant realities of hygiene, the Chinese turned toward them, transforming what seemed like madness into methods that saved countless lives. In their strange rituals lies wisdom that modern medicine is only now beginning to fully understand.